throughout the book, we will learn that no self is what is signified here in the book as a left part of the brain, right? So, according to the writer, the author of the book, it is our left brain that is a prime factor of our mundane psychological issues. As we all know, left part of the brain is highly interpretive mind, which is always engaged in making judgments and doing language and interpretations. Then to live with left part of the brain alone throughout the life is going to be a Hercules task. Secondly, it is not going to be very pleasurable for the people because it is very discomforting. I mean, people with overcrowded thoughts are always are very perturbed and frustrated, psychologies. Most when people say something to us, it is not always right.
Yeah.
But it is our brain, left of the brain, which considers it right and signals us that it is right, and therefore you must identify yourself with that particular, in opinion. So if you are aware of this just entire, situation, or aware about this function of your left of the brain, this will be very easy to get over. Not every time the left part of the brain needs basis, data, or some empirical to form the interpretation. Now, what it means is that our left part of the brain is always engaged in interpreting things, right? Even when there is any sort of data or in the absence of data.
Writer has clearly said that we are the, you can say, we identify ourselves with the kind of patterns we have adopted, or we have, we have, you can say, picked, right? And whatever we think, that is nothing but a pattern which we have adopted, right? So this is not going to be fixed. This is not going to be there forever, because this keeps changing, and this is all this all is the play of your left brain. So Robin, welcome to this show. And as we did a book review in the previous video, and in the similar fashion, this video is also going to be based on the book, that is No Self, No Problem. And when I was reading this book, I found that this book can prove to be a life-changing book, because it can be a game changer as well, because this book deals with the neuroscience and Eastern philosophy. Generally, what happens, people think that they have got the false idea of the self, right? And Eastern philosophy doesn't believe in this actually. So this book is going to be very, very useful for people, because this clarifies all those misunderstanding, misconception which we have got, and as a result, we always fall prey to our left brain, which always keeps narrating some kind of stories which are not at all, based on the reality. These are the, you can say, the kind of excuses which this brain keeps making, and making a fool out of us, right? So this is, this is the channel where we always talk about some ideas, and we always talk about something more deeper, something deeper. And the kind of conversation we are going to have, especially on this channel and through this podcast and through this book review, people will definitely have a very good understanding of the book, and they will definitely be able to apply those learnings which they will be getting out of this video. The purpose of creating such videos is that the people should have clear understanding about each and everything, so that they will have no confusion when they are embarking on their journey to live a very blissful, very awesome kind of life. And obviously, because books are the experiences of the people, and whatever they have learned in their whole life, whatever they've done in their whole life, they are sharing those ideas or experiences through the books. And that's why I always believe that the books are really very transformative, and they can prove to be a game changer, right? So before we go deeper into the conversation that is all about, and this is a kind of book review which will definitely begin giving people the whole idea about why they should go for this book, and how this book can be very useful to them, and how can this book help them live a very peaceful and very easy and very successful life, right? So before we go deeper into it, I want you to say a little about it so that we can have a very effective and very deep conversation on the same.
Okay, good evening to you and good evening to everyone. This book review is not very different from the book review that we did previously, especially where we talked a lot about, everything is psychology, a book that was written by, Deep Pravedi. So in that book, we learned a lot about how if you, with the help of psychology, can really take everything under control, especially your racing thoughts and your stress, your anxiety, and everything. And that we learned a lot from that. Now, this book is very much similar to that, but it is a different way to handle the same problem. So, in the previous book, we learned about the psychology and the natural psychology, and that we learn how to apply this natural psychology and how not let other psychology to dominate our psychology so that we could be free from all those stress, anxieties, and every possible dilemma that we come across our day-to-day life. In the same way, with this book, we will learn a lot of things, but this book is more scientific and more uh, conclusive in terms of its remedy. Because when we deal with books pertaining to the subject of psychology, we often consider that they are somewhere dealing with these kinds of remedies so that with the help of these remedies or doing some uh, exercise on that, we could have some relief, right? So this book, which is No Self, No Ego, is all about, you can say, a book which is probably will tell you about your brain and its functions, right? And how you can uh, understand those functions, and with the help just your brain itself, you can regulate your emotions. And if not, then you can at least understand that those emotions, those thoughts whatsoever are not permanent, and it is always impermanent nature. So these types of learnings we are going to grasp through this video, and this is what we are going to discuss as let's see what happens.
Yeah, so before a person goes to buy a book, they want to know what the book is about so that they can get benefited while reading that book or by reading that book. So the first thing which we have to discuss is tell me what the book is all about. And the book's title, as I already shared with you, it's No Problem, No Self, or you can say No Self, No Problem. Yeah.
So the book No Self, No Problem. Okay, let me make it very clear and very short and very graspable for the viewers to understand that when the book says or comes with a title called No Self, No Problem. So we all know what is the meaning of no problem, but the phrase which is which needs to be concluded here is no self.
Yeah.
So, throughout the book, we will learn that no self is what is signified here in the book as a left part of the brain, right? So, according to the writer, the author of the book, it is our left brain that is a prime factor of our mundane psychological issues, which you name as anxieties, depressions, and racing thoughts and conditionings patterns forming, right? So all this happened just because of this left brain. So but this also needs to be very clear to the viewers that no self doesn't mean that we have to permanently segregate or separate this left brain or this left hemisphere from the mind and just keep hanging on to the right part of the brain. It's not possible.
Yeah.
Rather, we need to understand it in the context that if we understand this left brain, uh, through all possible experiments the book carries on with, which we will talk later in the this video, we will be able to understand the true nature of the left brain. And understanding alone about the left brain will be a solutions to the problem. So the writer basically is much willing towards helping you uh, realize this very hidden solution, which is with us always, and therefore we don't need to go to ask for help someone outside. And it requires a little bit efforts, and these efforts are just to understand about the left part of the brain, right? So here, no self simply means your left part of the brain. Now, the thing that we have to understand, and the book which majorly deals with, is that the brain is divided into two parts or into two hemispheres, right? One is the left and the second is the right. The left part of brain, which is at the center of the discussion here, which has some primary functions, and among them functions are such as language, interpretation, speech, judgments, formation of patterns. All these are the functions basically belong to left part of the brain. So right from the very evolution of human mind or the human existence, what we can conclude through this book is that we survived till now. To be very honest, without mincing my word, I'm saying with the help of left brain only, because left brain is always uh, the one that keeps alarming you about the
Yeah.
possible threat, right? So it is always there with you because it only knows uh, about existence, and it works on how the existence to be preserved and protected, and therefore it keeps interpreting things, it keeps dealing with different thoughts. Secondly, the thoughts, especially the place from these thought arises, is also the left part of the brain. So you can say that left part of the brain is the active part of the brain, comparing to the passive part of the brain, uh, which is right part of the brain. I won't say that right part of the brain is a passive one, but when we compare or make a comparison between the two, then the left part of the brain deals with more activities. Now, on the other side, the right part of the brain basically is known for its creativity. It's often the one which deals with humanity. Since it is creative, then it often goes beyond the imaginations, or it goes beyond a certain formations of the patterns, which is only the work of the left part of the brain, right? So these are the major functions of the right and the left part of the brain. Now, when this thing is clear to our viewers, now it would be easy to grasp that when we learn that these thoughts and these ideas uh, emerge right from the left part of the brain, then one of those thoughts, one of those questions that comes to us, which is more often discussed, is that who am I? Right? It is one of the most powerful spiritual question ever been posed to the humanity, right? And therefore, we keep dealing with this question throughout. Now, the writer here simply talks about that we really don't need to take everything seriously, especially when it comes to left part of the brain. Why? Because we know that the left part of the brain deals with interpretation a lot. But one thing which is also needed to be understood here is that not every time the left part of the brain needs basis, data, or some empirical to form the interpretation. Now, what it means is that our left part of the brain is always engaged in interpreting things, right? Even when there is any sort of data or in the absence of data, it has its very uh, innate function to continue to do interpretation out of nothing. We will also try to understand how it does this interpretation with a scientific experiment in the later part of the video. But for the time being, we must stick to this very point that the left part of the brain has its function of interpretation. Now, this interpretation is what that keeps causing us agitation and perturbation, right? So these pattern formations are also the part of the left part of the brain. And when we deal with these kinds of thoughts and ideas, we certainly feel that we are uh, fully uh, loaded with these kinds of thought, which is completely beyond our control, right? But the time when we realize that these ideas, these thoughts which are emerging or springing out from the left part of the brain have no existence at all, right? So the book will tell you that how you should deal with this left part of the brain while not taking it seriously all the time. And in this way, we will try to conclude that yes, this left part of the brain is something which has to be given, importance, but not more than it needs, right? So in this way, we will try to understand this very whole, argument based on scientific experiments, as we will try to understand in the later part of the video.
I've also read a few books dealing with the memory, dealing with, this neuroscience, and I got to know that people who use the left brain, they are very intelligent as compared to those who use their right brain. And what is the function of left brain? That 90% of the things are done by left brain, and 10% of the things are done by right brain. I mean, those who are intelligent, their left brain is activated, and those who are not very intelligent, their right brain is dominant. This is what I read in those books. So now this is what we are going to talk about. We are going to talk about the patterns. As it is said that our pattern is our identity. What is your take on it? How can this has been said by the writer himself that the patterns are our identity. So what is the take of the writer on this, so that people will be getting to know uh, what is there about the patterns in the book.
Okay, this is very interesting because this is truly a very masterpiece of the book, personally, I think, because what we are today is just nothing, it is nothing but a result of those patterns that our mind formulates and forms. We
Hmm.
accept it or not, but it is a reality. So, for example, if we go back to our teenage or maybe way before it, we will find ourselves identifying with something different picture.
Yeah.
And if we compare that identity with today's identity, then both identities are different.
Yeah,
For
completely
example,
different. Yes.
at times when I was doing my MA English literature, I was delved into this, literature books, and I mean, perceived myself as someone who is more interested into this field, and therefore I, led my way in that way, right? But as soon as I jumped in this very law field, my entire identity has been changed to me. I don't, see myself as a literature guy anymore. However, I am more into reading, but now the pattern has completely been changed because here I have become a lawyer and an advocate, right? So now my identity to me is all different, right?
Hmm.
So one thing that we learn from the book or the author tries to convince us or convey us is that our patterns that we form are the result of what we are. This is one thing. Now, many people might get uh, feel a little bit uh, uneasy or may feel discomfort because these patterns are not always good. Some patterns are highly conditioning, moreover of negative nature,
Yeah.
and it is really difficult for people who holds that pattern to run with it or to live with it, right? One thing which is very positive part of the book is that these negative patterns or the positive patterns are both impermanent in nature, means temporary in nature. So as we grow older, we will see that these patterns will continue to be in a different shape or in a different pattern, right? As it will give us a feeling of a different picture altogether, right? Today I'm feeling myself to be a lawyer, and this is my personal identity. I identify myself with this very identity of advocate or a lawyer. Tomorrow I might be doing something else. The identity will be altogether different. So what is positive part of that, that our pattern are a subject to change first, which is not
They are never
permanent.
fixed.
They are never fixed. So people who live in this depressive state of life, if they know and aware of this very fact, that those patterns whom they are considering a permanent or conditioning part of the brain are actually not the conditioning or the permanent, because today or tomorrow it is going to be evaporated, because it is just a part of a life. So the writer, the author of the book says that we should not be uh, bothered about these patterns, because these patterns are not your true identity. Because what are these patterns? These patterns, for example, the work of our left brain is also related to language. Symbols. What are these symbols on language? These are mere dot patterns of dots, symbols, right? Our left brain recognizes this and formulates a particular picture, right? For example, this is a very common example. One might experience it. So next morning, a guy who gets a call from his office boss, right? And he tells him in French language that you are no longer in need and therefore you are terminated from the office.
Mm.
The man who doesn't understand this French language may not be panic on that particular, part of the communication, right? Because the brain, the left part of the brain of that boy has no understanding about that pattern of French language, and
Mm.
therefore he might not be panic, right? So that's how our left part of the brain, works solely on patterns. Sometimes it is often, suggested by people that it's better to be limited to certain aspects of life and enjoying only those patterns of life, so that our mind could be free from different kind of problems. We have seen several times that around us some people are very free and very careless, and one thing which is very common in those people is that they never they never get bothered about things. Why? Because they haven't gone through different patterns of their life or the brain, right? So therefore, they don't need to be very much concerned about each and everything.
Yeah.
People who experience different patterns all the time will have more burden on them to deal with that, right? So therefore, people who are uneducated will be always careless, having no certain problems pertaining to psychology, comparing to those who are very educated and have read a lot of books or dealing with these kinds of writings, because then there is a possibility of formation of different and multiple patterns at the same time. So our patterns, our identity, according to author, simply means is that what we think is what we are, and what we think is basically regulated under a certain situation, circumstances. So environmental effect or environmental factor plays a very significant roles in forming your pattern. We have seen many people who are very intelligent, undoubtedly, but if you put them under some harsh conditions where their expertise are not tapped properly, then these people also end up being failure, because then they will form a certain negative pattern of their life, right? And they will consider those patterns uh, the true identity of them. So the author simply, urges people to not take these patterns seriously, because these patterns are just your temporary aspect of your brain, and which is just a result of a certain conditions, situations, or the environment. When the environment changes, the pattern changes at the same time. I mean, we might have heard this very common phrase or the prescriptions from the doctors when a particular patient feels little lethargic or depressed or have a dull mood. The prescription that comes to that patient is that he must take a leave and must visit to some hill station for
Yeah.
refreshment purpose. Why he says so? Just because of so that the patient could form new pattern. Mind. This is what is the power of the brain, right? Second important thing, which is also very important, we often get feel you know apprehended. Why? Because we feel that these patterns are a true identity of us, and therefore we act accordingly. But we don't know that our patterns, uh, or our, especially the left brain, have an innate quality or a feature that keeps changing its pattern according to its requirement. For example, sometimes we face a certain criticism in our life. People who are emotional, highly emotional, might end up taking those criticisms seriously. But in most of the cases, they overcome these, criticism. I mean, however, grave or grievous they were. But this is a possible scenario I'm talking. But in some of the cases, we find that people who receive these kinds of, criticism, they never get bothered about it because their left part of the brain continues to form different pattern, which acts like a defense against those patterns, which is working against the person himself. So this is the quality of the left part of the brain. So our left part of the brain deals with this language and formation of patterns, and these formation patterns, what we find as the way it regulated, but it is not permanent, it is temporary. Once we understand this, there is a fair possibility that we could jump, or we can be free from this ebb and flow of these uh, uh, thought process, right? We could not get stuck if we know this is what I wanted to share.
So you simply want to say that the writer has clearly said that we are the, you can say, we identify ourselves with the kind of patterns we have adopted, or we have, we have, you can say, picked, right? And whatever we think, that is nothing but a pattern which we have adopted,
Right.
right? So this is not going to be fixed. This is not going to be there forever, because this keeps changing, and this all is the play of your left brain. Your left brain keeps forming such patterns, and we take them for real. And this is what keeps making us feel that we are certain way, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. So the next thing which you'll tell me that what is the, as everybody in this world, and on this planet is trying to avoid suffering. Nobody is actually willing to suffer in their life, and all the struggle we see, all the drama, and everything that we see in this world is being done only for one thing, that nobody is willing to live a life of suffering. And so the question I'm asking you is, and this has also been clearly, clarified and explained in the book. That tell me the biggest source of suffering in our no, what is the biggest source of suffering? The things which we have been told about is the left brain. Left brain is the biggest source of our suffering. Tell me, how is the biggest source of suffering?
Okay, we will understand this with one experiment, and it is a very famous experiment. But before this, I want to tell you something. uh, we know in the beginning, and we learned in the beginning, that our left brain is what is the prime factor for all that suffering, right? because it is always engaged in forming interpretations, judgment, right? For example, if someone calls me something which is disturbing, or says something which is inappropriate, right? Maybe it is his opinion, but not the fact.
Yeah.
But if I perceive this, now my left part of the brain, if very sensitive, out of emotion, would consider his opinion seriously. And in this way, this very left part of the brain will guide me to accept me, to identify myself with that particular, opinion of that person. This is what is the common, problem with most of the people. Therefore, even the most peaceful mind, if gets any disturbance through any criticism of any second person, the entire serenity gets disturbed, because it is just because of the habit of making judgment of the left part of the brain out of the opinion of other, is what that causes a lot of problem. So we must understand that this is the main part, this is the main functions of the left part of the brains, to be always engaged in doing interpretation and making judgments. Because when people say something to us, it is not always right,
Yeah.
but it is our brain, left part of the brain, which considers it right and signals us that it is right, and therefore you must identify yourself with that particular, in opinion. So if you are aware of this just entire, situation, or aware about this function of your left of the brain, this will be very easy to get over this problem, right? Many people really don't know the function of the left part of the brain, and therefore it becomes really hard for them to cope with these situations. We learn a lot that in this very competition or competitive era, right? People often feel inferior, and even when these people are not mentioned, especially in a particular talks or the conversations, but mere someone's words or their gestures are so impactful that they give them some negative notions about one, right? I mean, ask yourself. Today we are open to this exposure, where a world can perceive us, and we can also do the same thing. So if we see someone, doing something in their life which appears to be really fantastic, even when that particular segment is not for us particularly, but we will consider it as it is just uh, done for us, right? And we will start taking it seriously. So our left part of the brain is always into this kind of activities, and therefore we must know this. Now, why the left part of the brain, according to the question, is always the one that uh, serves this suffering to us? There is an experiment. For example, I don't know viewers know about it or not, but there was a psychologist, Zill Taylor, and in the year 1996, somewhere around, and she was found to have her left part damaged. So what she was left with was with her right part of the brain. And you won't believe that she narrates her this, uh, you know, part of life is the most peaceful time. And then she concluded that it is the left part of the brain which really causes suffering, because without the left part of the brain, the life is much like uh, free of problems. In fact, in one of the podcast, she even called herself to be feeling, to be enlightened, as what happened in the case of Gautam Buddha. So she didn't even hesitate calling herself a female Gautam Buddha who
Mm.
reached to the acme of enlightenment. And all it could be possible just because of her left part of the brain was damaged, which means it was not in function. And she was doing all activities and everything in a day-to-day life with the help of right part of the brain. So one thing which is clear from this very explanation of Zill Taylor, psychologist, that your right part of the brain doesn't cause you much suffering because it is just a creative part of the brain, right? Now, the experiment which I'm talking about, which is also very important, and this will tell you that how left part of the brain, causes us suffering, and how it is important for all of us to understand that this suffering is truly uh, a false suffering, as there is no such suffering, but just because of the left part of the brain guides us and compels us to identify suffering, we suffer that, right? So, splitted brain experiment is what is the name of this, particular example, or the experiment, in which what happened, that the brain was splitted into two parts, and both part of the brains were put to experiment separately. We all know that the left part of the brain is all connected to the right eye, and the right brain connected to left eye. So both the part of the brains were put to the experiment, and let's see how the experiment goes on. So viewers must listen to this very specific part, and they will understand, I mean, how easy was for all of us to grasp this very, you know, this very part of left part of the brain, right? So first, the word WALK, walk, was put to the right part of the brain. We all know that the right part of the brain has just a function such as creativity, right? So it doesn't understand language, speech, interpretation. So therefore, the word was first written, the WALK, and it was put to the right part of the brain. And as soon as the brain receives the word in the written form, it stood up. It means it signaled the body to stand up, and the body stood up and started moving. Right? Now, soon after this, the left part of the brain was put to test.
Hmm.
And in this way, especially on this point, one question was asked to the left part of the brain. And the question was, why did you start moving? Why did you start moving?
Hmm.
Left part of the brain deals with language, so it understood the question, and what it replied is something very surprising and astonishing. I mean, just ask yourself, what could be the possible response of this left part of the brain? I mean, if we uh, go with this common perception, a common understanding, so the answer of the left part of the brain would be that it would probably say it doesn't know what happened to the right part of the brain as an experiment. So therefore, I cannot say anything why I've started walking, right? This could be the probable response
Hmm.
of left part of the brain to this question, right? But instead of it, what left part of the brain said, which was very opposite and contrary, it said that I'm feeling thirsty and therefore I started moving to go to get some coke for me.
Hmm.
Now, what it shows? It shows that habit of making and forming interpretations of the left part of the brain, and that too on a condition when there was no exact data available to the left part of the brain. Why no data? Because if you go back to this very experiment, how it started with the right part of the brain, and both brains were divided, splitted. So what is happening to each of the brain? Neither of the brain knows about it, right? But still, this left part of the brain just interpreted the walking of the body as it was feeling certain, thirsty, or it was feeling thirsty, and therefore it went up to get some coke. So this is how it proves that left part of the brain is nothing but a way or a machine to do interpretation, and it can do with data or without data, as it did in this particular experiment, where the data was available to the right part of the brain, not with the left part of the brain, but
The
still
brain.
it but still the left part of the brain did that. So it shows that we should not be taking seriously this particular left brain all the time, because it is its habit of interpreting things, doing all these kinds of judgments.
So creating
So
it
this is
is passing some kind of judgment on its own is its habit, and everything that is done by it is done out of its habit, right? So this is
right.
the pattern it has developed. Okay, very nice. So it means people should not be believing everything they hear, from their mind. I mean, they just experience it from their mind, and they should not be taking it for granted. They should be trying to analyze. I'm asking you this, right? So if they want to analyze what is whatever that has been suggested by the brain is worth accepting or not, so how they can apply this, I mean, how they can make the most of this product of this mind. I mean, what should they be doing so that they can get the right they can reach the right conclusion, and they can make the right decision, because its habit is often to create some stories, and this may be a very false story, maybe a very, can say, a story which is not at all going to be useful for us. So what do you think? We will be
See,
talking about, you will be answering this question. Before you answer that, let me ask you one more answer, and you can add your answer to that. We've got different brains, left brain and right brain, and there is a middle path as well. That's what's suggested by Lord Buddha, right? So left brain on right brain is also there, so, and middle path. So which one do you want to choose as life governing tool? Left brain, the right brain, or the middle path?
okay, let me begin this with a story. I mean, it's a very short and a very popular story of Gautam Buddha.
Hmm.
And this is important because since we are dealing with the middle path, and therefore it's important to bring Gautam Buddha name and his experience that he did with his life. So Gautam Buddha, went through his very struggling phase of life, in fact,
Yeah.
where he threw himself to this austerity or this
Hmm.
very ascetic lifestyle. And at times he found himself so weak and almost vulnerable.
Yeah.
Almost he was the one who escaped death to a certain extent. And
Hmm.
after that, what he realized that uh, in extremes conditions, there is no possibility to be
Yeah.
enlightened, which means
Yes.
if one wants to be enlightened, then at least one should know that extreme is not at all the way to that leads us to experience this enlightenment. And therefore, he chose the way which is called the middle path, which means just always try to be very balancing in your life, not moving on either of the extreme parts, right? So, for example, if someone uh, gets success, then this happiness or ecstasy as a feeling is very likely to be perceived by that successful person. But how do you express it, which you must be very careful about. So if you express it wholeheartedly and out of craziness, then it shows that you are going and enjoying it to the extreme level. So what Gautam Buddha says is that you have to control your emotions on both phases of your life, in your success or in your failure. You have to maintain your composure. And here the concept, this middle path comes in. Now, how the writer, the author of the book, tries to concretize this very middle path with an experiment, right? So therefore, this book, as I told you in the beginning, that it's full of experiments, and therefore it doesn't, leave any room of doubt, right? So when it comes to choosing for any particular part of the brain in order to uh, use it and to hang on it and to live our life with it, then first we need to understand the functions of each of the brain, not functions, but exactly how you are going to deal with each part of the. For example, if we decide that we must always cling to this right part of the brain, then the situation would be such. What will happen then? then we know that the left right part of the brain is just a creative part of the brain, right? It is also called the brain which is one that believes in peace, right? As what we have learned with the experiment of Zill Taylor, she felt extremely ecstatic, especially in the absence of the left part of the brain. But at the same time, if you continuously to cling and stick to this right part of the brain, and without taking help of the left part of the brain, you might miss the very spice of your life, because the left part of the brain is not what that keeps you uh, awakening or aware of the threats which might be for your existence. And in the absence of it, you might be feeling absolutely uh, spiceless life where there is no fun at all. So you may have a good life with the help of right part of the brain, but this is not a complete life according to the author. Now comes to this left part of the brain as an experiment as to what will happen if one chooses left part of the brain as only a tool, as a guiding tool for the life. Thus, we all know left part of the brain is highly interpretive mind, which is always engaged in making judgments and doing language and interpretations. Then to live with left part of the brain alone throughout the life is going to be a Hercules task. Secondly, it is not going to be very pleasurable for the people because it is very discomforting. I mean, people with overcrowded thoughts are always are very perturbed and frustrated, psychologies most of the time as we experience, right?
Mm.
So when one sticks to this left part of the brain, which is highly interpretive mind, highly active mind, I think will leave no room of peace for the person, right? So one thing is clear to us is that neither right nor left part of the brain is uh, is sufficient when we choose it separately
Mm.
as a life regulator.
Yeah.
But then comes the third way, which is called the middle path.
The
Why
path,
do we call it
yes.
middle path?
Mm.
Because
Because
here
it
we
is
are going,
between the two. It is between the
yes,
two.
yes, which means our one foot is in each of the brain.
Mm.
So this is why we call it, middle path. Now, what does it mean when we say middle path, especially when we talk in the context of left and the right hemisphere of brain? See, we know that left part of the brain is engaged in all these activities, which we have already discussed a lot, and we also know about the functions of the right part of the brain. So our life is full of uncertainties, yes,
Yeah.
and there is nothing as such, sure, which we can be very confident about, right? And this is very likely that we might face certain instances or or events in our life which might be very discomforting, right? Now at that particular point it requires that we should be able to balance our psychology, because when we face a certain tragedy in our life, this is our left part of the brain which gets very panic. And if your foot is both in left part and the right part of the brain, so when even you feel panic, or let's say gets angry on a certain occasion, the next moment you will realize with the help of the right part of the brain that this is nothing but just uh, inhabitable part of life, the
Mm.
feeling which basically we learn and receive from the right part of the brain. Many a time in our routine life, on certain occasions, we might feel, I think, uncomfortable on slight issues, on trivial issues. For example, we are walking on the road and someone cuts off our way,
Mm.
and then we get disturbed. We get really angry. So, the time when we get angry, we feel panic. The next moment, when we start thinking this entire event as just full of silliness, then this very balance, you understand, this very balance of going or going through this ebbs and flow of emotions would be very well in a regulated mode. And this could be possible when you know that your left and the right part of the brain are both engaged
Yeah.
as a regulator to lead your life, to control your life. So solely or separate or solely, belonging or relying upon only one brain, either of the two cannot be a solution for a healthy or a peaceful life if we are really looking for that. So therefore the author suggests that it's always better to choose this middle path, and the middle path is nothing but to be going with both left and the right part of the brain, and that's how
Yeah.
we conclude our life as a peaceful life.
And before we wrap it up, I just want you to tell the audience all the teachings which we get from the book, so that people will definitely be getting very confident about buying the book and beautifying their lives. So tell me the final teachings of this book that people can get from it.
Say the final teachings of the book which I got, and I want you will possibly have if you read that, that you will understand that uh, what you think you are is nothing but a figment, and which is just you receive from the left part of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you go through the book and you will learn through these experiments, because people may fight over religious issues,
Mm-hmm.
but there is no doubt or a scope of argument on something which has been scientifically proved, right? So when you will read that book, you will learn how the left part of the brain weakens you in a certain extent. I don't say that it is a bad uh, a part of your brain which really causes you concern, but what I'm saying is that overwhelming ness of left part of the brain in your life as a part of uh, your life, then I think it is going to be very difficult to live with it. And therefore, this book teaches you that you must be able to know the functions of the both part of the brain, and you must be able to understand how the brain functions, right? And once you understand the functions of the brain, this is a possibility that you can somewhere end up on the right path, on the right path of the life by going consistently with left and the right part of the brain. So the first teaching and the foremost teaching for sure you are going to get from this book is that you will understand the proper functioning of the left and the right part of the brain, and it will tell you that left part of the brain which keeps forming judgments and interpretations are not always true, which is not permanent, which is temporary rather. And once you absorb it, once you imbibe it, you will be fearless out of apprehension.
Yeah. So I think the audience has now got what they will be learning out of this book. And once they have gone through the entire video, they will have no doubt about it, and they will definitely be going to improve their life just buying this book, and they'll be relishing on it, and they will be enjoying themselves, and they'll be beautifying their lives. So with this, I'm wrapping it up, and we'll be there in the next video. Till then, take care.